Alright, so quick overview of basics about how to use Redshift. Should get you through, you know, a week's worth or two of assignments with just the basic stuff. So, here's the weird little turntable I have set up for this character. I'm just going to grab this person, assign them a new material, and in the same way that you want to use the standard surface shaders or whatever for Arnold, like the Arnold specific materials, you want to use Redshift specific materials as well. So in this case, I'm just going to grab Redshift material. And you can see that it makes this super awesome looking, just random material. I'll call this RS skin. Oh, one thing before I forget to mention, if you can't find Redshift on your computer, so you can download the free trial of Redshift, but sometimes you might load Maya and it might not come up with any of the Redshift tab up here or the materials or any of that good stuff. So if you can't find it, just go to Windows, Settings and Preferences, Plugin Manager. And then you can actually just, it happens to be the top one here. If it's unchecked, just check it on. If you can't find it immediately, just search like red, and it should, you know, filter it up. There's also some weird hoops you need to jump through sometimes on lab computers, but it seems like they've fixed those. So if you have issues on any of the lab computers not being able to find Redshift, just shoot me an email and let me know. Sometimes there's a file you have to like transfer, but again, I think they fixed that. So, anywho, so I'm going to open the Redshift render view here. I'm going to hit play to start my render. And unlike oh my, I definitely assigned the floor to have a texture there. So you'll notice that, I mean, this is like ridiculously faster than Arnold. It does watermark the crap out of your stuff, but you can also, so if you go up here, you can just select, instead of perspective, just select render cam, and you can see, cool, now it's rendering my view. The one really awkward and kind of awful thing that Redshift does is it makes everything start off really shiny. I don't really know why. But if you go into your default material, you'll see that there's a roughness tab, and you can just drag that down and make it more or less shiny as you need. They also, the same way that you would have presets for Arnold materials, they have a bunch of presets here. So I have like a glass texture. Glass and water I find to be pretty similar. But they have stuff for like aluminum and plastic and all this other different stuff. When you start getting into, especially like the metal presets, some of these options are a little bit more advanced. And I find kind of more unwieldy to deal with. So it's like, it's not unreasonable, it just like takes a little bit more effort. I'm not going to go into it like super a lot in this tutorial. But yeah, I mean, they have a bunch of cool stuff. They have Jade, which gets into like subsurface scattering, where that's like kind of the same thing with skin. Like if you ever see an ear with light behind it, and like that, the ear kind of looks red, that's because light is going and it's bouncing around in your ear and coming out. And it's like kind of showing differently because of how it interacts under your skin and like bouncing into your skin. So like Jade has the subsurface scattering, which actually looks pretty cool, I think. Milky Coffee is always an awkward one. That looks absolutely horrible. You do like a tinted glass, etc. There's a bunch of options. Honestly, I just think they're fun to play with. Paper is probably like the closest thing to a Lambert that you can find in this. And also, this is Redshift rendering without any lights in it, which is nice. I do like that it at least does that. It's lovely. So anyway, I might just start with paper. But yeah, so I mean that's pretty much my my person there. So I'm gonna really quick just throw in. Yeah, I'm gonna throw in some lights. I'll throw in. So if you want to do a dome light is what you'd use if you want to use like an HDRI image. So I'll throw a dome light in real quick. You can see that now there's a bit of shading in here, and it actually tends to be pretty aggressive with needing more samples with this. So I'm gonna in here just map in a HDR image that I have. I'll do Hull of Fish because darn it I can. And I actually, now that I look at this, it's probably better for a tutorial to maybe make this something like gold or something a little more reflective. And that is kind of amazing, actually. I like that a little more than I should, but so good. Like, Redshift is so fast, guys. Like, this would take forever on Arnold. I'm not gonna lie, I really like that. Anyway, but yeah, so that's how you map it in HDRI, and again, you can see that it's I'm gonna set the roughness all the way to, actually, if I set this to chrome, it should. Usually they do have chrome options. They don't have chrome. It's actually really weird. But you should be, you can see the reflection and the lighting and stuff from the background on this guy. Anyway, that's how you map in HDRs in Arnold. I'm going to show you a little bit about other types of lighting, so I'm just going to get rid of that dome light. Look how fast that is. And I'll set this, I don't know, for some reason I'm kind of thinking gold is like kind of easy to see. Oh god. So you can see here, since there's nothing in the background, it's just displaying as black. So if you ever have your metal just like looking really ridiculous and black like this, probably is why, because there's nothing in the background reflecting in here. You'll notice like it's just a void of nothingness. If I were to maybe like duplicate these and just throw some random planes back here, it might be more inclined to render some kind of reflection there, depending on where they end up. But anyway. So there's a light in, usually if I'm doing manual lighting in Redshift, I'm going to use a physical light. Portal light would be something like you have an HDRI in the background and then you want like a cutout for a window. The portal light sort of functions as that cutout. It's a little bit more computationally intensive. IES light is kind of like a physical light, but slightly different. It's pretty cool. We're going to go over those in CGI 2. You're also welcome to investigate them on your own. But anyway, physical lights. So I'm just going to throw that in. And as soon as I put that in, it's like, cool, everything's black because this light isn't a person. So I'm just going to look through that light. And I'm just going to set up like some kind of pseudo basic-ish 3-point lighting setup, maybe. So I'll grab this dude here. I'm going to jack up the exposure a little bit. And like, look how fast that renders. Like, that's almost... There's still like some graininess from sampling, but like, that's almost a real-time render. Like, that is honestly so impressive. I might also make this a little rougher because this is actually somewhat hard to see what the heck is happening. But alright, so I have this guy here. And I'm just going to go ahead and maybe add some of my other lights into the scene to, I guess, just sort of make a point. You'll see some weird stuff pop up the more lights I add in, because I'm going to go out of my way to like bring up weird light problems that sometimes happen. So maybe I want like a rim light back here. Where are you? Oh, interesting. It actually seems... Wait, what am I in right now? Oops. Oh, I'm in a volume light. I'm like, what am I doing? Alright. Physical light. Cool. Panels. Look through selected. So I'm going to come out here. And you'll notice, so like if I'm trying to put like a little fill light on this guy right now, or a rim light. And you'll notice that this renders in my scene, which is kind of awful in so many ways. I think that's quite awful. So if there's a, right here under your area tab, you can just check this to be invisible. You can also, down in this area tab as well, you can actually switch the shape of your light to be like a disc, a sphere. This might be not bad for like a light bulb or something like that. A cylinder, don't really know why you'd need that, but excuse me. But you can do it if you need to. And you'll see that actually changing the shape, like once I set this to cylinder, this illuminates the background a lot more. So, I mean, this would be like kind of a slightly more realistic version of a point light, a little bit, sort of. But if I decided that I, maybe I like that, I just didn't want it to be show up in the render, I could just set that to be invisible. The other thing that you can do One thing I do in general when doing lighting sometimes, I'll just set my light to be like a really weird color. Like I'll make it green so it's very obvious like what this light is affecting. So in Redshift you can actually do kind of like a cool thing, which I'm in favor of, but if you go up here under general to light type, you can set that to be a point light. You can set that to be a spotlight, so it'll behave pretty much just like the Maya spotlights. Like the default Maya, like you go into rendering and you have like these lights here, pretty much behaves exactly the same. Is it terribly physically accurate? Not so much. Do I have a soft spot in my heart for spotlights that will never go away? Yes. So I will shamelessly use this option sometimes for weird stylized lighting with Arnold. I'm not saying it's the best option or most realistic, but you can do it. In this case, I kind of actually don't hate the way this looks for my my rim light. I mean, you can see. So then again, if you have a spotlight, I'm just going to make this insanely bright. You can go down, so in the same way that they have a tab for area lights, there's a tab for spotlights as well. So you can adjust like the cone angle, the fall off of this fall off curve. If you set fall off curve to 0, it will give you something like this. And please, I beg of you, if you turn me in something like this, even if it is rendered in Redshift, I am going to think it is rendered in like Maya hardware or Maya software. So if you're going to use Redshift, I mean, at least make slightly softer shadows. Like it looks, for the most part, that's like a lot more realistic and less harsh looking. If you have to use a spotlight, I would highly recommend not doing this with it. Also, in the good old days of Mental Ray, getting that softness like tripled your render times, but it was so worth it. Like it looked so much better. Anywho, so you also have settings here for like your shadow transparency. You can set it to 1 and just like 0. Settings for softness of your shadow, all this other stuff. But anywho. So in this case, I think I'm just gonna like leave this the way it is, because I can. I'll just make it a little bit less intense. And say perhaps I don't completely despise this lighting. One thing I might do actually, so like I kind of wanted, this shadow is a little bit dark because it's like the only light in the scene. And this stuff in the background is all blown out. So what I actually might do, is I might just like, for grins, purely for grins here, I'm gonna make this light purple. I have terrible aesthetic with lighting, guys. Like, this is not realistic and it doesn't look good, but I kind of a crazy person with my lighting. But I'm gonna make one more light in here, and I'm just gonna make another physical light. And again, this is not realistic rendering at all. And I'm just gonna look through that, and I'm just gonna put this pretty much maybe like straightish down on my character's head. Turn up that exposure. I'm gonna set this to be a spotlight because I want it maybe like illuminating the person very aggressively, but having the stuff in the background be less bright. You can see that anywhere that is it's hitting that other shadow, it's lightening it considerably. So I'm just going to go down to my spotlight and be like, cone angle, that's not what I want. Fall off curve. But fall off angle, I'll set them to be like really aggressive. And then what I'm actually going to try for Grinsies is going and doing a little bit of light linking. So Windows, relationship editors, light linking, I'll just go to light centric. So I would like that light that I just added, I'll call it top light. I would like that to affect everything in my scene. What I don't want is, I'm going to say maybe I don't want this key light affecting the random additional background objects I have, which are very poorly labeled, incidentally. And you can see that they pretty much now have no light on them at all, so they're rendering as black, which is not so much what I want there. But what I can do, actually, I'll take my top light and I'll disconnect it from my figure so I don't get that really sharp highlight on the top. But Where's my render view? That was a bad decision. But if I go down here, I can make the cone angle wider, I can basically expand it so it actually hits the stuff in my background if I wanted to. And it'll lighten things a little bit, just like ever so slightly in the background, but I'm doing a really bad job of this. Did it better in my last video. Alright, so I think actually what might be less gross of an option in this case would be to just take my no, I still want this top light. Alright, I'll take my key light, I'll duplicate my key light, and I'll just set it to be basically a background fill. I'm going to open my background keyframe, and I'm going to disconnect that from my figure. So basically my goal is to control the lighting on this figure and the stuff in the background separately. Purely just because it's what I want. This isn't strictly speaking a Redshift specific thing that I'm doing right now. I'm going to take my other key light, and I'm going to turn it off of like the walls and the floor, and maybe I'll make this sometimes I like changing the color of my lights to make them just like really brazenly obvious what things are actually affecting. So I'll take this and I'll take the exposure down quite significantly. So you can see by doing this, I still have a brightly illuminated illuminated figure in the front. And then the stuff in the background falls off into the darkness a lot more. The only downside of doing what I just did is I now have no shadow coming off the person. But again, this isn't so much a lighting tutorial as it is just how to use Redshift, so I'm going to stop fiddling with my lighting for now. And I think I'm going to leave everything putrid and green, because honestly I do like it. Like I said, I have really bad taste with rendering. Anywho. So mapping in, I'm curious to see what this does. Nothing good. All right. So mapping in textures is pretty similar to Arnold. They have more or less like the same attributes for things. So in this case, I'm just going to go into my skin, and for grins, I actually might. I want to see what happens if I set this to glass. Yeah, I mean, you can see it's like kind of picking up the reflections and things a little bit. If you're ever trying to render glass, and you can see there's like the shadow doesn't really show up terribly well. Don't quote me on this. It's been a while since I've actually rendered this in Redshift, but I believe there is a setting for samples. This actually might be in the individual material itself. There's usually an option for sample depth or like ray trace depth for these, and that's just like when you're using caustics or like anything clear like this, so like water or glass. Usually that will say go deeper into this object, and it will absolutely add render time. But for the most part, it's actually pretty worth it. But anyway, I'm just going to set this back to my random gold character, because I can, and I'll start with this. So I'm actually going to map in a little roughness map that I made. And again, same way, I'm just grabbing the checkerboard texture and I'll just throw that in there. And I'll grab this, I think it was. This might just be, okay, yeah. So, I mean, you can see there is roughness on this. I exported the map kind of stupid. 100% should have exported this as like a TIFF, but instead I did a PNG, and now it kind of shows up poorly. I find Redshift has a lot fewer issues with alpha's luminance showing up. But, or like, you know, having to check alpha's luminance or else everything explodes kind of thing. So in this case, I'm just going to see like what happens if I fiddle with some of these slider values to maybe try to get this a little bit rougher, because it's very much not rough. Alright, so I can do alpha gain, and that makes it less rough, I guess. Yeah, I think it's mostly just alpha gain. Oh, ooh, that's what it is. Okay, so it's alpha offset. That'll actually make the entire thing less rough. So in that case, like if you botch the exporting of your map and you need to like sort of redo it, you just twiddle with your alpha offset down here. And again, Redshift is not as picky about alpha's luminance. If I did want to, I could go under my effects tab, same as anything else, and just invert this, make it super, super matte. That's really gross looking. I think actually this has been inverted possibly, and it looks really weird now because I have like these offsets set to really high, like weird numbers. Yeah, like if I fix that, it behaves very differently. So that's actually interesting. Invert will take into consideration the color balance stuff as well. To be honest, I've never tried that before. I do not want this inverted. So I'm going to say maybe something perhaps like this is maybe decent-ish for like a plastic color, maybe. Whatever. I'll just go back to my texture. And I will map in my color value pretty much again like normal. I'll just grab this and be like, hey, color file. I'm not going to lie, I do very much like the weird color, gold color that I have going on now. It makes me strangely happy. And I find this render view tends to be a little bit, except for apparently right now, it tends to be a little bit more responsive about uploading your textures. Sometimes it just takes a minute or two to actually kind of get itself together. You can see at the bottom it's like 2%. It's like trying to very slowly convert that texture. I actually don't know why it's taking so long. I might just reopen that render view. Play. I feel like I was having this issue the other day, and nothing like really fixed it. Yeah, it was just like one of those weird things that sort of like seems to have fixed itself. But so if you want to render like only a specific area of your frame at once, just grab this thing and it'll pull up like this weird little view here. So like maybe it also will shift the watermark around, so it's in the most annoying possible spot. But I'm just trying to figure out why the heck it's not mapping in my color texture. I might have just grabbed like a stupid file for it, or I mapped it into something stupid. No, I didn't. Oh, okay, duh. So the weight of my diffuse was for some reason set to 0. If I set that to 1, it should theoretically fix things. I've also found that many of the, like I said, these options down here are like kind of honestly complicated and weird, and sometimes if I'm having issues, I'll just like set this, either I'll twiddle with the settings and see if it gives me something that I expect, or I will just be like, hey guys, how do we feel about paper as a preset for this, and just like grab paper. Or I'll just assign it an entirely new material, because I don't know what it is. I have really bad luck with twiddling those settings. I'm still figuring out, like, it's not a hard rendering engine. I'm just for some reason having issues like figuring out what exactly that stuff does. I need to like read a little bit more about it. But in this case, do it again. So grab a Redshift material. I'm going to be lazy and not label it. I'm going to map in my color. And I have this strange feeling that this might work better this time. Maybe. Yay! Okay, cool. Now I have a colored character, and that hair looks gloriously like hot, like warm melted liquid chocolate. Like it makes me want to go to Hershey Park. Anyway, and I'll just throw on my roughness texture again. So actually, I'll show you guys a hypershade thing you can do, because I am a fan of the hypershade. So in this case, I have all of my all of my textures are still floating around right here. And I just need to find the one that I'm actually looking for. So in this case, it's probably, oh god, these aren't ordered, are they? That's kind of gross. I'll stop my render real quick. Oh god. The lag is real. Alright, sorry. Stop rendering. Bad. Away. Away with you. Why are you trying to export things? No. Just stop rendering. It's literally all I want. Okay. Alright, so I'm just gonna try to find character texture, noise texture. Alright. How the heck many times I import this character texture file? Weird, okay. Alright, I actually can't find that file, but conceivably, if I did want to map on, like, the noise texture, I think it's, was it file 11? Character. File 7. Alright, sure. If I want to map this, like, Lambert, texture into my roughness, I could just grab this and just drag it onto roughness. And that is probably going to do very ugly things to my render, but we're gonna see what happens. Did that actually render at all? Okay, yeah, so I mean you can see that it mapped on the texture. It's just, it's not a good texture by any stretch of the imagination, and I have done many gross things to this texture to make it sad, so I'm going to go back to my original texture. And again, like, this is shinier than I expected. I made this in Substance Painter. It's a bit shinier than I wanted. So I'll just come down and fiddle with the alpha offset a little bit to make the whole thing a little bit rougher. Which for some reason my computer is like, no. But yeah, so it's a very subtle texture. Like, it's not like super crazy. But anyway, so I mean you can pretty much map stuff into Redshift that way. I find it's a little bit easier to use with, like, non-metal materials, but, like, it's absolutely usable for metals. Just, like, you know, do a little research. I still need to do a little research. Once I fiddle with it more, I'll do, like, a specific video on metals. But yeah, it's totally usable for stuff. Worth using for your finals, I think, if you want to take a crack at that. And it definitely does render significantly faster than Redshift does. Or I'm sorry, it renders much faster than Arnold. So, like, I rendered, you know, twice the number of images that were 4 times as big in Redshift in half the time that I did in Arnold. It was, like, really crazy. But yeah, so I mean that's kind of scatterbrained intro to Redshift and, like, lighting and mapping textures and all that good stuff.